welcome to the 7th episode of Seen It First, brought to you by Fictionary, your story editing software. In this series, we sit down with best-selling, award-winning authors to talk about first scenes, share secrets to writing craft, and celebrate the stories that thrill and inspire us all. My name is James Gallagher, and I am a Fictionary certified story coach and a copy editor. And today, we are very excited to welcome 4 fabulous romance authors: Delancey Stewart, Marika Ray, Kelly Collins, and Melanie Summers. This should be a lot of fun. For the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to talk to them about their careers, about writing romance. We're going to look at one of Kelly's first scenes in Fictionary, and this can be interactive. So if you have questions, comments, raise your hand, drop those in the chat, and we'll also have some time at the end of the episode to take live questions from the audience. Usually at this time, I provide a bio of the author, but since we have 4 authors here and our time is better spent listening to them speak, we'll go around the room and let them introduce themselves. And if you could, authors, tell us a little bit about yourselves, what you're working on, what you have coming out, and if you could, maybe one thing that you do particularly well writing romance. What is your romance writing superpower? And maybe also something that's a challenge for all the writers in the room. So probably a great place to start is with Delancey, who was our second guest on this series, and she was kind enough to bring some of her writing friends along with her, so we appreciate that as well. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be back. Thanks for having me. And it's so fun seeing some of my friends here because we don't get to see each other a whole lot because we live all over the place. So, okay, let's see, quick introduction. So I'm Delancey. I write steamy small town rom-com. I'm currently working on a ridiculous hockey rom-com series that I'm super excited about. And I say ridiculous just because I think it's funny. And that's usually my happy place, is writing things that I think are amusing. They tend to resonate best with my readers. So I'm pretty excited about this particular series because I think it's funny. So I think humor is one of my strengths. And then as far as a challenge, I don't know if you guys are into Strengths Finder, but my strengths are, I have activator and achiever pretty high. And I also have intellection. So I should be good at plotting, but I'm really not at all. And so I tend to really put into practice ready, fire, aim, and have to hold myself back a lot and rethink things that I thought were such great ideas because I'm just ready to go all the time. And sometimes a little thought does pay off. I'll pass it over to Marika and let her introduce herself.
Hey there, I'm Marika Ray. I have been publishing since 2018. I, just like Delancey, I write steamy small town rom-com. Let's see, I'm working on a series right now, a spin-off series actually of my best-selling series. I think one of my strengths would be I tend to do some kind of ridiculous humor type situations in my books too, but I also pair that with a lot of heartfelt things as well. So one of my claim to fame is I had some readers at the end of one of my series send me pictures of them crying reading the epilogue, and it like made my little author heart happy that I made people cry. So if I can make them laugh and I can make them tear up, then I figure that I've done my job well. So.
Okay, Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly Collins. I also write small town romance. I'm currently finishing up a 24-book series. So writing the 24th book is really difficult because it's like saying goodbye to some really good friends. What I think one of my strengths is I'm really good at gut punching. Like I really get the emotions in there to make people feel things. And then probably one of my weaknesses is like Delancey, I'd really love to be a great plotter, and I can plot, but then I find that I lose a lot of the passion to write the book once it's plotted out, because then I already know the story and then it's boring for me. So then I end up, I can't tell you how many unfinished manuscripts I have in my like work in progress folder, because then I'm like, yeah, don't want to do that anymore. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I think MJ is next.
Well, hello. I'm Melanie, and I used to write as MJ Summers, and I wrote really steamy romance. And then I ran out of positions, so I moved to rom-com. And so Kelly still calls me MJ because that's the name I was using when we met like 10 years ago, I guess. But anyway, so I write rom-com, and I also have written 2 women's fiction novels as well that are the first one, you could call it grief lit, and because it was like the ugly cry kind of thing. And I ugly cried for 6 solid weeks while I wrote it. My poor husband was like, oh God. But so yeah, so writing the funny books is a better space for me mentally than the women's fiction. And so I kind of try to stay there. I think yeah, some of my scenes in that are maybe over the top, in terms of it probably wouldn't happen that a woman would dress up in a used Edward Scissorhands costume, like just fresh off a guy that she sees and, walks into a Comic-Con event to try to get her man back as the grand gesture. I don't know anyone that's happened to, but that's kind of stuff that ends up in my books. And so I think maybe the funny stuff is probably my strength in terms of my work. And I think the challenge for me is how to keep it fresh, like, because I wrote 5 really steamy books and then I'm like, oh God, I'm done with that, and just trying to stay excited about writing rom-coms, because I think I've written like more than 20 of them. I don't know the numbers, but math is hard. But so I find just trying to keep it fresh and surprise myself so that I can surprise the readers, because like if I'm bored, just like what Kelly was saying, if I'm bored, then I think my readers will be bored too. So that's it.
Well, I think there should be more costume-based grand gestures. I like that.
Excellent.
One thing for a lot of beginning writers, especially, they might not really understand all the differences between like women's fiction and romance. And, you hear a lot of those questions. You're like, well, I don't want my romance to have a happily ever after. And you say, well, maybe it's not really romance. So what do you see, and for everyone else to chime in too, like, what do you see as the big characteristic differences between those two? And do you ever even start to write one and find, no, I really should be writing the other?
Well, for me, the biggest difference is the expectation, the reader expectation. So my first my first women's fiction was about a woman who's grieving the loss of her husband, and she does meet a man, but his situation makes it difficult for them to have a happily ever after. My second one isn't a romance at all. It's about a middle-aged mom with teenagers who's just freaking had it with everything in her life. And so she tries to get her power back, and her family's trying to stop her from, changing things. And so that one didn't really have any type of romance in it at all. But I think basically with the reader expectation is, if you're going to call something a romance, it better have a happy ending, or people are going to be really mad. So, but I don't know if other people have other definitions. So
I don't have a different definition. Well, James, you know that I work as an editor, so we see a lot of newer books come through, and a lot of newer writers, I think, fall into the trap of believing that they need to write something that is completely different than anything that's ever been written before. And in order to, like, they'll come to me and say, I have a romance, but in the end, the heroine dies, and it's so wonderful because blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, like, that's not a romance. And so I think that's the problem that some new writers fall into, is thinking that they really need to make it super different, when in reality, readers are looking for the thing that makes them most comfortable, the thing that they like about the genre. And for romance, it's a happy for now, happy ever after, some kind of happy.
Well, Kelly, I think you said that you are working on your 24th book in a series. And what are, romance is driven so much by a series. People love writing the series. How do you know when it's time to start a new series, and what are some of the challenges that come with writing in a series, especially a long one?
Well, for me, like, I think it's time to leave the series when you're done writing the series, like, because you can't bring something fresh or new into it. My readers will never get tired of that series. I think I could write 100 books and they would still be there. But for me, I needed to move on to something. Plus, just sort of, and when you have a really long series, like 24 books, which is a long series, it's very hard to bring new readers into book 24 and start them back from book one. And while like the series is still doing really well, I find that, my read through is great, the sales are great, but I am bringing less readers into the series, which means I need to start something new if I want to continue being a writer, because you need to have fresh readers. You need to be expanding your reader base constantly all the time. And unless your read through is 99%, which most of us aren't, it's hard to keep the momentum going when a series gets so long. For this series, it's been really easy to write. They're connected characters in a small town. The small town is its own character. And the biggest comment I get from the series, it's called Aspen Cove, is that everybody wants to live there. And so that makes me feel really great. Like, in fact, some of the things I do in social media is people will say, well, what house would you give me? And then I pick a house for them that belongs to somebody in the series based on maybe a conversation I have with them. And so people really feel like this series is a part of their life, a part of their town, some of their best friends. And that's when you know you have something special. But I have started multiple series in conjunction with this that just never took off. So there's something really magical about this series that I have not been able to repeat. But I think also that when you're in the middle of a series, it's hard to repeat something when you're still in it. And I can't repeat that magic if I'm still in that series. So it was time for me to move on. So I finished the book yesterday, and it's just going to sit on the shelf until August, and then I'll look over it again. It'll go editing, and it won't release until October. But it's the last book I have to write for this year. So I'm kind of free for this year, and I'm just really excited about that. And I'm just working on this new project that I sent you in bits and pieces until I figure out like if this is my next best thing.
So Marika, what is your experience with writing in series, and do you have any insights to share with our listeners here?
Sure. So I also write the small town as well. And I had a small town called Auburn Hill that all the characters, the fictional characters and my readers started calling it Hell. So affectionately, everyone just calls the town Hell. And I wrote 3 different series in the town of Hell. And they took off. Like everyone was saying, the readers start to love the town almost as much as they do the characters. And so I didn't want to leave that town. It was selling well, which tells me that I'm giving the reader something that they want. So I kept going with a 3rd series in that town. But then that thing kicks in as an author where you're kind of like, oh, I'm kind of bored of that town and you want to do something different. And so this year I'm trying a spin-off series with the small town right next to Hell. So I had already introduced this town in the previous series. So I'm hoping there's enough tie-ins there that my readers are willing to go to a new town with me. I've only released the first book in that new town, and it did well. So I'm hoping that bodes well for the whole series. I tend to kind of skip around, but once I had success with Hell, I wanted to stay there for a while. So maybe in a few months, I'll call you back and say, guess what? Bad idea. I should have stayed in Hell, but I'm giving it a go. So we're going to try this new town and we'll see.
And Delancey, I know that setting is a big part of your book. So why do you think it is that readers love those settings so much, especially small towns or mountain towns or that type of thing?
I think especially American readers, there's just a sort of nostalgic Americana kind of feel to a small town. Like we all probably picture the main street with the little shops and, you know, people walking around and getting ice cream. And you can take that same kind of feeling and set it on the coast or put it in the mountains or put it on the, you know, wherever. And readers immediately know what a small town is, because somehow I don't know if it's Norman Rockwell or Leave It to Beaver or what it was that gave us all that same kind of identification of what small town means. But I think it also implies connections between the people that live there that you don't necessarily have in an urban environment. And that's, you know, as a writer, that's good and bad. That can be really fun to play with, because those connections can be like the nosy neighbor or the busybody that everybody tries to keep their business from because she's going to spread it everywhere. Or, you know, you get these kind of stereotypical personalities that are expected in a small town that are really fun as a writer to get to weave into your, especially if you're writing comedy.
So Melanie, lots of writers have different starting points, and it might be the character. In some cases, it might be the setting. It might be an intriguing plot. Where do you find yourself starting more often than not?
I would say with the characters for sure. Usually it's either when I'm writing romance, it's either one, either the heroine or the hero, and then try to figure out who would fit with that person, but not easily for the, you know, so you can't make it too easy. But I have one series that's set on a fictional group of islands in the Caribbean. And so with those books, I do kind of look at this, like I come back and write one every year and I think, okay, you know, what are we doing? And it has to have a certain feel to it. And so with those books, I do obviously have setting as a piece of that, but mainly it's like the characters themselves and who do I want to hang out with for the next few months. And because if I don't want to hang out with them, I just won't. My house will be very clean, but the words won't get on the page. So
I think that's a really cool way of looking at it when you're in it and you're, you know, looking at the who you're going to be hanging out with for the next couple of months. Melanie, let me ask, with such a long series like that, do you have any tips for tracking continuity across the books? Because I know that can be a real challenge.
So did you mean for Kelly to answer that? Like, or?
Oh, yeah, both.
Okay. Well, so my series isn't, I don't think it's that, like compared to Kelly's, like 20, like my longest series is 6 books. And actually, I have an amazing friend / PA who does a book Bible, a series Bible for me. And 3 of my series are all linked. So she has that all prepared, and so that I'm not reusing character names or forgetting, you know, all those really important details that readers will notice. So, and I think, I don't know how Kelly does it, but she probably has, she must have some magic.
Yeah. Kelly, please, I apologize for that too.
Oh, no, it's fine. So with, as with Melanie, I also have the same PA / friend, and she keeps a killer book Bible. And so when she does proofreading through my book, she writes down every person that is in that book. Because what I do in my series, I might plant characters throughout book 1 and I may never use them. But then when I'm looking for another character, I'm like, oh, I introduced this character in book 1 and now they're going to have their own book in book 5. Or for example, I had a woman that kept showing up in book 1, book 3, book 4, and she was an abused wife, but nobody knew that, but she just would show up all battered and bruised. And then one night she just screamed and said, I need my own book. And And I thought, oh, well, that's book 5. So I plant characters throughout the series that I don't know if I'm going to use or not use, but I do put them in there. And then our PA actually will list everything about them. For example, like their name, what they look like, what their backstory is, anything that's unique about them or a quirk that they might have. Anything that she can find in the story, she puts them in this book Bible, and then I can go back to the book Bible. And if she's only, one of the things that I have on my book Bible is the books that they appear in. And so then I can go back to that book, look and see where she appeared and what is it about her that makes her worthy of her own novel. And then I might use her in a future novel. So I think a book Bible, if you have a long series, I think anything more than 3 books is probably imperative, because you can, like, I can name everybody Claire. Like, I like that name. So everybody might be named Claire in my books. And then Melissa is our PA, and she's just like, oh no, Kelly, you use that in this book, and you tried to use it in this book, and then you're trying again in this book. And she's just like, nope. And she's the boss. So I just said, okay, so we'll pick a new name. So it's really good to just to track all of that, because I mean, when I first started, and the reason why I need a book Bible is when I first started, if you read any of the Aspen Cove books, so book 1, there's this whole like outline of the town, like where the shops are. And then by book 3, they have like shifted. Now the diner's across the street, and nobody has ever noticed or told me, and I'm not going back in and changing things, but it's super important to keep track of that. Otherwise, like, you know, the sheriff's station is on every single corner before you finish the series. So.
Yeah, as a copy editor, names and directions, those are always tough. So I think that there's also a real magic of dropping a character into a book that you just show enough that that then the readers are really excited to see that then they're featured in a later book. So that's, you know, seeding those earlier books of those kind of characters is really fun. I want to say on our last episode, we ended up talking a lot about the idea of collaborating and authors collaborating together. And I know that Delancey and Marika, you collaborated on the digital dating series. And what was that like? And what was your process for doing that? Because I think it's really interesting to see how different people collaborate together.
Oh gosh, well, the author I collaborated with, she was a piece of work. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. She was lovely. So Delancey and I met at a writing thing for authors, like a conference, and we had already gotten along really well online. And then once we met in person, we were like, we get along really well. We write the same thing. We had an idea. We wanted to go for it. It was just so easy. And I know not every collaboration is like that. But she and I just, we're really excited. Neither one of us is super like the story has to be written this way, or I'm upset about something. And we're both pretty easygoing as far as, you know, what do you want to bring to the table versus what am I bringing to the table? Practical wise, we, you know, typically with each book that we wrote, I think there are 5 books in that series. One of us would take the heroine and one would take the hero. And, you know, that made it easier because I was only speaking, let's say, for the heroine, and she could be the hero, and we didn't get, you know, 2 different weird characters mixing. So that it worked out well for us, and that was probably the easiest collaboration I've ever had.
Me too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, as far as, I don't know if I'm still muted. I'm not good at tech.
Nope, you're good.
I'm good. Yeah, as far as like the practical hows and how did we do it, we literally we'd get on the phone, talk about the big stuff, like, okay, who are these characters? What's the, you know, the main plot? What tropes are we going to use? And we had kind of like a hook in mind with the digital dating series. In fact, Melanie's kind of involved in this because she was at the time writing with Whitney Dineen. Is that how I say her last name? And they were writing a texting series, and there were a million there were a few texting books, and they were doing really, really well. Is that accurate, Mel, or did I just basically come and be like, can I steal your idea?
Nope, there, you did not steal our idea at all. But I think there was a moment for that sort of, texting and digital stuff, right? And that's
Yeah.
definitely something that's going on in our world right now. So it was
Yeah,
a
because I
fun-
remember I called Melanie first and said, hey, I have this idea. I sort of think I'd like to propose it to Marika because we've been looking for a co-writing idea. And, is this too close to what you guys are doing? What do you think? And being the wonderful, gracious person that she is, she was like, of course not, go ahead. So Marika and I talked through the big picture stuff. And then like, as we're talking, we're writing on the same Google Doc, kind of capturing all of what we're talking about. And one of us would be like, oh, wait, and then there can be this guy. Wait, no, he should be for book 2. And so all of that is getting captured on the fly. And then just below that in the same document, we would just put like chapter 1 and then the hero's name. And then whoever's writing chapter 1 would just start writing it there. And we'll ping each other as we finish a chapter. And usually because she's on the East Coast and I'm in the middle of the country, she would write, well, I think I write in the morning, you write kind of more midday or mid-morning. So we're often writing 2 chapters a day this way and then working on our own work separately. So it was really a productivity booster working with Marika. And I would just go read what she wrote, make a couple quick edits here and there because I just cannot help myself. And then write the next part. And I assume she did the same thing, but she's much less pokey about me making mistakes than I
Well, I'm
probably
not an
are.
editor. That was actually really cool to have you as an editor that was able to instantly edit my work. That was a little intimidating, but it also worked out really well. It was good for me.
Yeah, it's always super fun. We're working on another, well, we have written 1 book in another series now and need to probably talk about whether that's going to continue or not. So
I see we have a couple of questions coming up too. Hope, I saw you had a couple of questions. Would you like to come on and ask, or would you like me to read them either way?
You can read them because they're up in there somewhere in the chat.
Okay. Well, I see you have one question about slow burn romance, and you're asking whether anyone would like has written slow burn.
I have. I've written one of my books in my Paradise Bay series. It's called Pride and Pina Coladas. So it's really, a modern day version of Pride and Prejudice, which is sort of the ultimate slow burn, right? Because they don't even kiss until the very end. So that one, I would call it a slow burn. It was fun to write. It's really, I like writing that stuff. It's hard to do if, I think, it's a little bit hard to do, but I really enjoyed it.
I've written a couple slow burn romances only simply because the character required it. But generally speaking, mine fall in the sort of norm of romance where you have, sort of like a passionate scene by the 50% mark, or but like if the character requires it, like in one of my Aspen Cove romances, I have a 9-month pregnant woman who's by herself, and she's not banging at 9 months, by chapter 5. So they didn't even, there was no real passion. There was like kissing and just a really deep into the character, and them getting to know each other was more important than the actual sexual part of a romance book. So I've had that, and just a couple of books like that where the character demanded more of a slow burn than maybe my typical characters would in a book. But for me, like, I don't write really steamy romance anyway. I only put passion on the scene if it's like required, and when I do it, it's more about the emotion than the motion, where I know that there's this like whole, we run the whole gamut with sex and romance and passion and romance, from sweet to super steamy, and I'm like sitting there at like maybe 2 to 3 flames maybe. It's pretty.
You follow the 12 steps of intimacy. I know
Yes,
there's levels of intimacy, and yeah, you follow that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So slow burn would probably be about a 5, a 3, somewhere in the middle.
Well, I think it could be, I think it could be anywhere from probably a 1 to 5. I mean, when you think about it, like the slow burn is more about, it can be more about the passion than the activity.
Right.
And about the commitment to the relationship than the actual activity. I don't know if my comrades disagree, but I don't think that you necessarily have to have the sex on the page to feel burn.
Right. That's what I found, it more intimacy rather than the actual physical. Oh, okay.
But I
Thank
think
you.
to define what a slow burn romance is too might be helpful. And you guys might disagree. I'm coming at this just from my own brain. But I think it just means, Kelly pointed out that a lot of romances have a passionate scene by about the midpoint, which in movies is called sex at 60, because movies are usually 2 hours and there's usually that high point at that 60-minute mark. So whenever I'm in the middle of writing, I'm like, oh, sex at 60. So that's kind of typical, but in a slow burn, you might not have sex at 60. You might have like the final climax might be a sex scene. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be super hot and steamy and that it won't hit a 5 flame rating, but it means it's not going to happen. It's not going to be an insta love situation. They're not going to get together early in the book.
Got it. Thank you.
Well, I also see a question from Nikki D, who I think maybe is Nikki Davenport, who is a member of the Fictionary community and very excited. She's going to be on our Seen It First episode in November, talking about her debut romance novel, International Incident. So that should be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to that. And Nikki, I don't know if you want to come on and ask a question, or do you want me to? I could ask the.
I'm happy to do it. Hello, thank you so much for being here. I had a couple of questions, but I'll just fire one. At first, I wanted to find out, how do you handle writing diverse characters? And not just about race, with all the other different ways that humans are diverse. And I've got a social work background, so I'm always asking this equity question.
Nikki, I'd like to jump in and answer that, because I'm completing about the 6th rewrite of a novel in which the principal female character is half Chinese and half Welsh, which is the stupid way to say it, but her mother is Welsh and her father is Chinese. The novel is set in 1912, so that provides some interesting challenges, because as an historian writing historical fiction, I feel compelled to bring as much of the real past into the novel as I can, at the same time that a lot of that past by modern standards is repugnant, and we don't want to repeat it. But I think that the most valuable thing I brought to the writing of a character who is, at the time, would not be a mainstream individual in society, is that I am the daughter and granddaughter of immigrants. And so I chose to focus on that aspect of her differentness, because there was a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment in America and elsewhere. And I encountered it even at the much later date when I was born and growing up. I dealt with that, and certainly my parents and grandparents had to deal with it very strongly. And when you're at the age of my protagonist, who is 20, almost 21, she's launching herself in society as a person, as a professional woman, and so all of these things are coming together. The suffragette movement, women's rights, and you know, the anti-immigrant sentiment, the anti-Asian sentiment. And so, yes, you have to make choices. One thing I have tried to avoid, because I don't like it when I read it, Nikki, I don't know how you feel about this, but sometimes when I'm reading novels that include diverse characters, as many do, I feel like they're trying to throw everything but the kitchen sink in there. It's like they want to address every single social issue that affected you know, that individual, and it becomes overwhelming, and I think the story can get lost in that. And so I try to pick and choose, and that's a very hard thing to do, Nikki. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, that was a fantastic question, and I think one of the remarkable things about romance is I think it's one of the most diverse genres in terms of not just the voices, but also just the range of subgenres too. It probably is more subgenres than most other genres, and we're getting about the time in the episode where we're going to bring up the first scene in Fictionary. So we're going to bring up Kelly's scene here. Do you want to cue up the scene a bit, Kelly?
Well, this is sort of like an amuse-bouche book for me, so it's a little off my normal beaten path, and it's a romantic comedy, and only the first chapter is written. So I just whipped it out last week and sent it to James. And really, the whole premise of the story is a woman looking to find love, but looking to find the deeper connection of love, and she's all the apps that are out there like Tinder and stuff really aren't designed to connect you with your true love. So she's developing an app that she thinks will change the dating world. And then but she's also super broke and getting ready to be evicted, and so she has like huge story problems. And the app is called Love Bug, and it has more bugs than it has love at this point.
Well, as you can see, I think Delancey has seen Fictionary, but the other three authors, you might not have seen this before, but this is the main working screen for Fictionary. And you can see that it lets you track all of your scenes across 38 character insights. So those are divided up among character, plot, and setting. So as you're editing scene by scene, you can check things like in setting, you can see that you've used things like sensory details in the scene. You can use that to help track continuity. You can grade yourself for something like emotional impact, where you say, does this particular setting have the best emotional impact that could have in terms of this scene? And of course, for characters, you can look at things like, does this scene have a strong does it have a clear point of view character? Does the point of view character have a strong goal? Is the goal and setting anchored at the beginning of the scene? So this basically is an editing tool that gives you a lot of checks to help you grade where you are as your novel, make sure it's working properly, and then begin the revision process to put out the best novel that you can put out. So Delancey and Melanie and Marika, what else do you have to say about this first scene?
Well, I read it. I had a chance to read it last week, and I really loved it. I thought it was funny, and I loved how, you know, the Juniper, the main character, is, she's just got such a clearly defined goal. And I loved her goal, that she's trying to create an app that will help people make meaningful connections instead of just you know, one night stand kind of stuff. And so anyway, yeah, I thought it was fun, and it made me want to go drink some coffee with some oat milk in it. And I really enjoyed it for sure.
Marika, did you have any thoughts on the scene?
Sorry, couldn't unmute. No, I was agreeing with Melanie. A lot of the same thoughts.
Delancey?
I knew you were going to call my name. I feel really bad. I missed the homework assignment.
Oh, that's okay. You know what? I want to ask. I didn't get to this earlier because, you know, a great sense of humor, and all of you do, and so humor is such a nice part of romance as well. And why is humor and employing humor such an important part of stories?
From my point of view, it's because relationships are funny. People are funny. And when you take two completely independent individual human beings and stick them together, especially if they're going to take their clothes off and start trying to do stuff, like things happen and it can be very funny. So I think acknowledging, you know, I really hate the smooth, very, you know, polished kind of romances where everything is just so hot and sexy and perfect and everybody's skin is perfect. And, you know, like it feels so unrealistic to me because life is really messy and can be gross. And it's funny. And if you can't laugh at it, we would just be crying all the time. So I don't know. I think it's just a really, really human way to look at the way that we all live our lives and the thing that we all most prioritize, which is connection with other people.
I just think the laughing is very like endorphin building too. So like when you can really laugh at a book, it gives you the same feeling as like the passion in a book, the humor in the book and the passion in the book, I think just kind of give you the same kind of feeling. And so when you can leave a book and you've laughed and you've cried and you've done it all, like you've hit all of those points that make a reader just want to come back for more, or tell everybody else that that book was great and that they need to read it, which is sort of what we're all going for. And we don't always hit the mark, but the one thing I would say is that like what might be funny to me though might not be funny to everybody else. Like I am super quirky and I have like a really different sense of humor, like I have a very dry sense of humor. So what might not work across the board for anybody who's looking for humor. But I know that these three girls are the funniest things ever. So like I learned from them too. So yeah, I think what my big thing is that the humor, it does build that the same kind of emotions as passion, and you know, and that's what I'm always trying to get is to reach in and grab a reader for empathy or for, you know, for them to understand my character. And I think, and I know I don't know about Marika, and I'm going to grab one of your books soon, but I know both Delancey and Melanie have super quirky characters, which I love too, because we all have a quirk or two, and it's like Delancey's right. Like when everybody's perfect, it's not so much fun. It's not boring. It's boring.
I think that's part of. Oh, go ahead, Melanie.
Sorry. I was gonna just say that I think that the humor makes the characters more relatable because we're not perfect and we can be very awkward, and especially when you're meeting somebody new. And yeah, so I think it just helps with people to connect with the characters, you know, and I think it just makes everything more fun. Just to, you know, for me, reading something funny is a much bigger escape because the world is quite serious as it is. And so, yeah, so if I'm into something funny, I can really disappear into that. So go ahead, Marika, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that, I mean, the reason the show Seinfeld was so popular is because they would literally take a little weird quirk of someone and expand and focus on it. And it was hilarious because we all can identify with, oh my gosh, yeah, I've done that, or I've been with someone who did that. And it was weird and funny. And I just think, like Melanie said, you know, there's a lot of serious things out there. And if you can inject humor into a love story to take your mind off of some of the seriousness, I love that personally. And a lot of the stuff, like, you know, we have ridiculous characters where they probably are a little over the top and they're probably not 100% realistic. but everything that we watch, read, etc., in a fictional sense is a little over the top. And I think it's okay to have those characters that are also a little over the top, a little crazy. I think we can all identify with a little bit of that, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and those characters carry over really well from book to book in series too, and they're fantastic for reader engagement and it's like a show like Seinfeld. If you watch a single episode, you don't really know the characters enough to get all the humor, but by the time you've really come to live in that world, it all resonates with you so much more.
And they are all very distinctive personalities. Like if you heard one line, you would be able to pinpoint who that character was without ever seeing the scene. You're like, oh, that's, so-and-so. And I think that that's super important when you're writing a book too, is to make your character stand off the page. So that way your reader knows that character. They don't have to go back and look into he said, she said. They know exactly who said that line because it's so distinctive for that character.
And I think too, to kind of go back to that small town question you asked, because this totally fits in, maybe you guys will agree or maybe not. But when readers get into a universe like that and they start to get to know it and they know the town and they start to know the characters and that crazy lady's always in the coffee shop over there, like that becomes part of what is the catnip about reading that small town, is that they know that these characters are about to walk by the crazy lady in the coffee shop. And so because they knew that happened in the last book and it's going to happen in the next book, like there's little Easter eggs you can start planting that make your readers feel like they're inside the circle, like they're part of something. And I think that's why small towns to me are much more fun than like New York City.
Well, we are about at the end of our allotted time today, and I think humor was a fantastic note to end on, and we got some great insights there on writing humor and romance, and all of the other insights that came along. If the authors, if you'd like to stay on just for a second after we close it out, we can thank you again. And I want to thank everyone for being here today. Next month in August, we have Elle Marie Wood, who's a fabulous horror author. She also writes about horror, and she has a great essay on the intersection of horror and romance. So I'm going to be sure to ask her about that. We're still scheduling September, but then in October, we have the return of our first guest, the amazing Jonathan Jans. And then, as I said earlier in the episode, we're very excited to have Nikki Davenport here for November and to look at the first scene of her debut novel, which I think is going to drop November 3rd or 4th, but that's really exciting, and she's going to be fantastic. So thank you, Delancey, Melanie, Kelly, and Marika. Thank you so much for being here. You're fantastic. Everyone grab a bunch of their books and start reading. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day, and thank you all so much for coming today.